What's up guys, Pax here. So now we're jumping right into the Genesis neutral cards. And this is gonna be divided, this is gonna be 4 videos. There's gonna be these 4 parts and each part's gonna have around 30 cards, with the last part having more card reviews. But we're gonna go right in the order that you have in the inventory inside the game. So let's jump right in. The first one that we have is Laragrim, and Laragrim is it's good to have on your turn, because you drop it on your turn and then the opponent on their turn, they're gonna be playing spells, and you're gonna be getting a copy of those spells. And since it's 1 mana, it might be an interesting card to play in terms of mechanics, so that you can get some extra cards into your hand. The problem is that if they don't have minions on the board for you to trade Laragrim against afterwards, because you don't want to give them your spells, then you're gonna have to use a spell on Laragrim to kill it, and that's gonna give a copy of that spell to the opponent. So it's a little bit trading what you want. It's like a risk and reward. So, but it might be interesting on a deck that's for example mostly focused on creatures, like for example a nature deck that's heavily focused on creatures. It might work really well because you never put in spells, so your opponent's going to be using spells and you're going to be getting spells for free. So for me, this has to be a 3-star card. Because it's not good, it's not bad, it's okay. Then we have Possessive To Pay. Possessive To Pay is quite interesting. I've seen this being played in a really interesting way, because unless the board is completely clear of creatures, this is gonna keep rolling on the board. As long as you always have one extra creature, one creature on the board, it's gonna have the Possessive To Pay, and when that dies, if there's another creature, it's gonna jump right onto that. And the thing is, it might be interesting in terms of mechanics. It might be kind of memey, but it's not that great of a card, because sometimes it can even jump onto a creature that has only 1 health and it kills it in that specific scenario. So for example, if you run Possessive To Pay, you would want to run it in decks that don't have 1 health creatures. And in that sense, I'm gonna give it 2 stars, because I've never seen this being played in a good way and working out. Next, we have Namebinder Zalzei. At the end of each turn, if your god power is active, change it to a random common one. This might be interesting if you want to change your god powers and then you kill the Namebinder and you are stuck, or you get to have that specific god power for the rest of the game. The problem is that it's random, so I would much rather have a legendary that you could play, where when you play you could change your god power into one of the other 4, for example. In this specific case, like jumping onto random god powers, it's quite bad, especially because you can't control which god power you're gonna get. So I'm gonna put this in the 2 stars out of 5 as well. Okay. Next we have Peculiar Spellworm. Peculiar Spellworm is super interesting because it's a super strong body. It has an issue, which is your opponent's at least gonna get a spell reduced to 1. And this might work in your favor or against you. If they're running a lot of, if their deck's really heavy on low mana spells, then it's not an issue, because you're reducing their cost by 1, 2, things like that. But if they're like a control type of deck, then you're possibly gonna give them something like Apocalypse Now, or a huge board clear, or single target removal for 1 mana. And that's super dangerous in terms of the combo mechanics that you can play. In the start of the game, where we had the open beta, lots of people were running this, but nowadays no one's running it. But I agree that it's still a powerful card, and you can pull out some easy cheats with it. Even though you have a better alternative, which is going to be the Pyramid Warden, but I'm gonna have to put this in the 3-star category because it's okay. It's not great. Next we have Expectant Chicken, and this card's super good. For me, it's a 4 stars for sure, because although it's confused and the chicken egg needs 2 turns in order to develop into a brass chicken, and then that chicken is also confused, it's essentially a 1 mana 3/3 with confused. And it's even better because it kind of protects you against board clears, because the egg summons the chicken as an afterlife. So if they clear the board and you're running an aggressive deck, the best thing you can have is afterlife creatures, because then they have to clear the board twice. And with the Expectant Chicken, it's an epic, so it's going to be quite expensive, but it's a super good card to have in really aggressive decks, because it's always good to have these types of aggressive boards. So 4 stars. Next we have Scarab Swarm. For me, Scarab Swarm is okay. It's not good, it's not bad, because the stat line is okay. It would be better if it would be 1/3, but then you have, because it's any creature, not just friendly creatures, so it kind of works if you want to like have a flash heal, and you could possibly play these types of cards in decks that don't have a lot of heal mechanics. You could play Scarab Swarm in order to compensate for that. So I'm gonna have to put this in the 3-star category, because there's some play to be seen here, but it's not a great card. Next we have Swashbuckler. I like Swashbuckler. The problem is that the Twin Strike means here in this body is completely crazy, because Twin Strike here in Gods Unchained doesn't mean that you can hit the face or the opponent's god twice. You need to hit, you can only hit the god once, and then you can hit a creature. So eventually what you would do with the Swashbuckler would be to put it on the board, that deals that has a row and deals 1 damage, and then on the next turn you attack the god, and then you trade towards the creature. So if you want to compare all of the stats, is basically having the same thing as a 1 mana deal 2 to a creature and 1 to the god, which is pretty good. But I haven't seen this being played a lot, so I'm still gonna put it in the 3-star category, because it's not that great. Then we have Raving Fan, and Raving Fan can be super dangerous. This is gonna go into the 4 stars for sure, because it can synergize with a lot of with some god spells that cost 1 mana, where you keep tapping the god spell every turn, and this gets out of hand super quickly. And since it's a 1 mana card, it's pretty interesting. The way that I play it is, whenever I want to protect something else, if another card has a really good effect, like for example Rebel Quartermaster, I'm always going to put a Raving Fan or something like this, which costs its mana cost is fairly low, but it can it functions as a really big threat, and the opponent's going to focus on the Raving Fan and not on the first card I have. In this case it was the Rebel Quartermaster, but it could be something else. In that scenario, it also has the flexibility of being able to do huge amounts of damage if they just let it survive and keep ramping up. So it's going to be definitely a 4-star card for me, because it's really good. It's not 5-star type of level, but it's pretty good. Next we have Back Alley Vendor with a Roar. Replace all enemies, enchanted weapons and runes with random legendary cards. If you're running a rune deck, this is good as a late game card. So you would want to save the Back Alley Vendor, because you would be primarily running an aggro and super early type of deck, and then once you get towards the end and they are summoning much higher types of creatures, then you can substitute your runes and your anims and things like that for legendary cards. And like, it's RNG, so it might work, it might not, but I see this as a very specific type of card that works in certain scenarios, and most of the times it doesn't work. So I'm gonna put it in the 3-star category. Next we have Netherborn Binder. The issue, it has a really good stat line. It heals the opponent's card for 3. The issue here is that there's better options. And typically with 1 mana, you're running things that have ward or blitz or things like that, or that give you a rune. Or for example, if you want to play a specific set, whether it's Vikings or Atlanteans or Nethers or Nubians, things like that, you're going to focus on having those types of cards. And that's why Netherborn Binder doesn't see a lot of play. In a lot of aggressive decks it's played, but it's not that great of a card because it's mostly for trades. You would play this in the early game to be able to trade against the opponent. So if you're running a type of deck where you don't have spells that allow you to target specific creatures, then this is good. But either way, I'm still gonna put it in the 3 stars. It's 3 stars out of 5 for me. Next we have Broken Harvester, and this card is really interesting because it not only can attack every turn, but it also attacks the random valid target. This would be even better if it was to attack, but then I would have to put it at 2 mana. But I think at 2 mana with 2/5 worth of stats, it would be even better. But it's pretty good in the early game to be able to do some trades. Even though it's a random valid target, it can also hit the face, so it doesn't always allow you to trade against other creatures. But it's pretty good. I've seen this a lot in aggressive decks and decks that need the upper hand in the early game. But I would still have to put it in the 3 stars because for me it's not that great of a card. Be considered 4 stars. And speaking of 4 stars, that's the next card. This is Backstreet Bouncer. Pretty much every rune deck. It's a really good card to have on the other types of decks because Afterlife cards are always good, where they protect you basically against board clears, and this one gives you a random rune, which means that you're getting a discounted spell, and it's also a threat on the board, and it's something that they usually are not gonna deal with because they don't want to give you a rune, so they're gonna leave the Backstreet Bouncer there until they use like a board clear or something like that. But this card is really good, specifically because of this. The Afterlife is a really good Afterlife, so I'm gonna put it in the 4 stars. Next we have Nimble Pixie, which has Flank Roar, Flank, and the Roar is summon another one. So 2 creatures with flank. These are okay, it's not great, so if you're splitting the stat line between different types of cards, it's worse for you because they're easier to be dealt with, unless it's something related to Afterlife, then yes, but if it's not, then they're super easy to be dealt with, and there's better cards out there with this type of stat line, so I'm gonna put this in the 3 stars. Next we have Leviathan Hunter, and even though this is a really weak card, it can give you some utility in the form of the 1/1 or the 1/2 Barbed Hooked if you're running a Viking deck, but I would still put it in the 3 stars because it's one of the weakest Vikings that you can play in the deck. Next we have Valkyrie Artsworn, a 1 mana 3/1 that gives a friendly Viking +1 health. This is super good because Vikings typically tend to have this type of stat line, really aggressive strength and really low health. And being able to buff one of the other Vikings is super necessary. This is a much better card than the last one, the Leviathan Hunter. So, and this card is basically a staple in any Viking deck. So I'm gonna put it in the 4-star category because it's really, really good. Then we have Midnight Cat, where you have a flank and you give another creature flank. It might be interesting as a finisher, but other than that, it's not that great. The effect's not good. So I'm just gonna say and put this at 3 stars. It's not great, it's not bad, it's okay. Next we have the Raised Imp. The Raised Imp shuffles 2 random nethers into your deck. It might be interesting if you're running a nether deck and you wanna, or for example a controlled type of deck. Shuffling cards into your deck are always good, especially now that you're gonna be taking damage once you are run out of cards in your deck. You're gonna be taking damage for the amount of mana that you leave open every turn. So this card's really good for that scenario, but I haven't seen this being played at all. So I'm gonna put it at next we have the Sentinel Princess. If you control another 20 and this gets +1 strength. So this is basically a 3/2 most of the times, because you only play this in an Atlantean deck. The thing is that Atlanteans are not that powerful yet. They're probably going to be in the future once the new expansions start coming out. There's going to be more Atlanteans and going to be viable to build an Atlantean deck, but until then this is an okay card, so it's 3 stars. After this we have Inflammable Imbecile, a 1-mana 2/4 with burn. I haven't seen this being played at all, and even though it gives you some trades, there's a much better option with the Skeleton Heavy at the 2-mana slots, and it doesn't have the burn. It's great for trades, but this one is terrible because it's probably gonna die super fast. In the turn you summon it, it's gonna go down to a 2/3, so it's a 1-mana 2/3, and as the longer it survives, the worse it gets. So I'm gonna put this in the 2 stars because it's really bad. Next we have Balanced Summoner, that allows you to reduce the cost of enemies, enchanted weapons, and runes to 1. And this, in the type of rune decks and NM types of decks, it's super powerful because those are already really powerful cards. Typically an NM, a rune, in the case of enchanted weapons is special, but NMs and runes, you're already getting a spell or a creature that's typically 1 mana discounted to its value. So setting it down to 1, it's basically you have cards that are discounted 2 mana each, and that's a lot of tempo advantage for you to have. So this card definitely goes into the 5-star, into the 4-star category. Sorry, almost said 5 stars, but not yet. 5 stars are going to be reserved for some special neutral cards that we're going to see later. Next we have Farsight Expired. Replace your hand with copies of Voyage to the Farlands. This is terrible because you're basically disrupting your gameplay, so I'm gonna put this in the 2-star category for sure. It might be interesting in a meme deck, but that's it. After this we have Empire's Footman, and this is the type of card that benefits from being in an Olympian deck, where it can easily get extra strength as well as protected. So if it was just extra strength, I would say that this card was super bad. Since it also most of the times is going to get protected, having a 3/1, a 5/1, a 6/1 with protected is pretty good. So I'm gonna put this in the 3-star category. Otherwise it would be even worse, and I would put it in the 2-star. Next we have Trojan Golem. I've seen this in, like, this should be run in pretty much every control type of deck because it's super annoying to deal with. It has frontline, it summons another frontline, it's hard, it's great for board clears because you always get another body on the board. So this is definitely a 4-star card, and on the upper ends of 4-star cards, by the way. After this we have Enrich Ally, where whenever a friendly creature dies, this gains +2/1 strength. It's fairly specific, although I've seen this get out of hand. It's not. I wouldn't consider this as good as Raving Fan, for example. So I'm gonna have to put this in the 3-star category because it's not that great of a card. It can be good, but it's not that good. Then we have Windup Roller, where you and your opponent draw a card. It's a good stat line, 3/2, pretty aggressive. You would play this in any type of super aggro deck, whether it's War, Deception, those types of things, where you want to keep drawing cards and you don't mind giving extra cards to your opponent. Typically in control decks you don't want to do that, but this is mostly run in aggro decks. The issue here, it's that like the stat line plus the effect is not like gigantic benefits, so I'm gonna have to put this in the 3-star category, and it hasn't seen like that great of play so far. Then we have Unruly Shredder. After this creature takes damage, draw a card and obliterate a random card in your hand. The fact that it's random card in your hand, this is terrible. Because you might get rid of like your best card, so I'm definitely gonna have to put this in the 1-star, and this is the first neutral 1-star card, because obliterating is already bad, but when you get to choose, well, it's okay because you get a huge benefit and you can get rid of something in your hand which you don't need at the moment, but doing that with a random card is just like asking to lose, so I'm gonna put it at 1 stars. Then we have Venerable Griffin with Protected and Cannot Attack. This might benefit in the future. This is a really bad card, but it might benefit in the future for if you add like Silence to the game, where you nullify the abilities of other cards, or you could give Frontline to this card, then it becomes actually pretty good, where you have a 2-mana 3/4 with Frontline is a really good stat line. But I much rather have like Pyramid Warden, and would save in terms of the combo cards that I need in order to be successful. So I'm gonna put this in the 2 stars because it's really bad. Not as bad as Unruly Shredder, but bad. Then we have Rock Drake Egg, burn 2, cannot attack. If you have 6 cards or more in your hand, summon a 6/5 Rock Drake. This is kind of interesting because you would mostly run this in a control type of deck, but the issue is being able to well, nowadays it's easier, but before, when you had the Bag of Tricks as a card in your hand, it was harder to count because the Bag of Tricks did not count for this. But nowadays it's easier to count. The issue is that you're not going to be able to play a lot of cards in your hand. This might work with something like a Forage type of deck, or a Flip with Deception. It might be pretty good, but mostly it doesn't work that well, so I'm gonna put it in the 3 stars. After this, another 4-star card, Pyramid Warden. Even though it has a really bad effect that benefits your opponent, it's fairly controllable, and one of the best things you can do is put a Pyramid Warden where they don't even have creatures in their void, so you're not summoning any creatures from their void. But it's fairly easy because the stat line is really good for what you get. You can buff this up, you can heal it up, you can do all sorts of things to be able. You can turn this into a different card. So this card's really good, and it's gonna stay at 4 stars for me. And finally, for this part, we have the Felly Tracker. It's a 2-mana 5/1 with Flank. This would only be good if it had like God Blitz or Blitz or something like that, but then you would have to decrease the stat line because 5/1's super strong. But the issue here is that if you put a 5/1 on the board, it's not going to survive until the other turn, so I'm going to have to give this a 2 stars out of 5. And that's it for the part 1 of the card review of the neutral cards in the Genesis set. Next time we'll move on to part 2, and we'll look at a bunch of cards in the 2-mana slot, the 3-mana slot, and the 4-mana slots. See you guys next time. I hope you guys like this video. Make sure you smash that like button down below and answer the question in the description. And if you don't agree with any of the ratings for the cards, make sure let's have a healthy discussion in the comments down below. See you guys next time. Peace out. Bye bye.